Can I tell you a story before we wrestle with Josh's question? Is it Joshua or just
If you mean by attention, yes.
is Joshua?
Yeah, I will snap right to.
It's just such a nice, powerful name. You know.
History.
Yeah, I named my son Yusuf. And it was because for many, many, many years in gatherings, I would sing the song by Hafiz has a 20-line poem, and Rumi, of course, has many lines in his poems dedicated to his teacher Shams. And I never thought I would ever get married, but you know, I was threatened, so I got married. And I never thought I would have children, but then I was threatened, and then I had children. And then when I had my daughter, I said, no, it's going to be Sufia Noor. You know, Sufia is for the Sufis, Noor is hopefully you will find some light at the end of the tunnel. And Yusuf, very much like Joshua, is this kid, very, very attractive, but gets himself in trouble, finds himself in the well, and he screams and shouts for many, many years, and eventually he's rescued. So when I realized I'm going to have children, I said maybe I should give them names that to some extent will express or embody the human condition, you know. But Joshua is a good name. But what I was going to say was, this class is such a waste of time, as all classes are. Even if you had a class that had the power to plant some seeds inside you, you need to have someone walk into your life and nourish the seeds, protect the seeds, and help them sprout a little. But that's too much work and too much pain. So an inspiration, you know, is like a temptation. It just revolves around feelings. It doesn't mean anything. Anyways, I'm sorry.
I was curious about if you attempt to rectify the gap between realists and idealists.
Okay, so let me do it in a way that works for me best. I don't know if you will receive it in the same way. It may rub you the wrong way. One of the rituals for the Native Americans for many, many, many centuries had been, maybe to some extent has still some value, is the peyote ceremony. It's not like a bunch of kids around the 1960s being counter-revolutionary, not liking the status quo, having read a couple of ridiculous books, maybe listened to a couple of ridiculous people, say this is the way we're going to counter the existing culture and norms by doing peyote or LSD or whatever the case may be. Now these are mostly white, uncultured, raw. Of course, they would never categorize themselves as such. But the peyote ceremony for the Native Americans, first you live in a very close-knit community. Everyone is profoundly intimate. they have this really interesting relationship with the land. They have vision quests guided by the elder of their tribe. They have a tremendous amount of respect for the tribe. The spoken word, they don't read, but the spoken word is magical for them, like the Bedouins in Arabia. Their relationship with food is different than ours. Their relationship with just life is very different. And then at a certain point, someone tells them it's time for you to have a different kind of experience that the senses can't allow you. Kind of like the early Christians. Will either give you alcohol, or in their case, will give you peyote, masculine. And they also knew that growing peyote is very difficult. You need to give the earth some time to regenerate. You need to give time to the plant to grow organically and naturally. So by the time this 20-year-old, or maybe a 15-year-old, was old enough to undergo such an experience, you have this culture in the background. So you smoke, but you smoke with thousands of years of culture behind you. So what you have in, say, the 1960s, you smoke. There's just no culture behind it. And whatever culture lives inside you, you hate that culture. And so you have this ridiculous, cheesy desire for freedom, liberation. I'm not quite sure who said it. It was one of the, a psychologist / anthropologist who had done some research for the Native Americans some time ago. He said that the white man goes into the church and talks about Jesus. A native Indian or American goes into his tent and speaks to Jesus. That's the difference. One talks about, which is plagiarism for the most part, and various assumptions, and the other is very direct contact and communication. Idealistically, it'd be nice for me to come to class and talk philosophy. And perhaps you've done it a few times. And it's nice to talk about Socrates, it's nice to talk about Pegasus, it's nice to talk about the relationship Socrates had with Plato. It's beautiful, it's exotic. It's like one of those philosophies that come to America or to the West from India, from Japan, from China, from the Middle East. It's about a teacher-student relationship that virtually you don't have such narratives in the West. So people gravitate towards those stories very, very quickly, and they want to kind of take part in those stories. They want to find a teacher for their own. They want a Socrates of their own. That's idealism. Justice. Let's find a shelter for every homeless person out there. Let's feed people food. Let's make peace between Israel and Palestine. It's like you go out with someone and you like them, you love them. And you don't love them for the right reasons. It's just body grows their body grows on you, and you become attached to just the time spent with them. And then you realize you have all these issues. And maybe it's a good thing, because then that love will generate enough inspiration, motivation, care, compassion, forgiveness, so that you could take care of them for a long time. But idealistically, when you go out with someone and you realize they have a lot of issues, hopefully you're young enough to look at those issues and say, I think I can tackle them, and I think I can fix them. Good morning. And that's the best form of idealism. You go out there, you see a homeless person, and your eyes meet, and all of a sudden, you have these sets of emotions, inspired within you, and you say, I'm going to just walk away from my life, as many people have done in the past, and just take care of the homeless and the needy and the this and the that. don't know if you've ever seen the movie City Hall with Al Pacino and I think it's John Cusack. Al Pacino in this movie plays the character of being the mayor or governor of New York, and John Cusack is his advisor. And he goes, on stages and talks, these beautiful talks. Later on in the movie, John Cusack confronts him, saying that, do you have any connections to the mob? And at this point, Al Pacino knows that he's being caught. He sits this young man down and says, when I first started in politics, I had this fire in the belly. I wanted to marry for love. I'm adding or putting words in his mouth now. I wanted to raise my kids really, really well. I never imagined divorcing. I never imagined smoking or drinking or snapping at my kids. But little by little, you realize that if you want your marriage to work, you have to compromise. There are things you don't like about yourself. There are things you don't like about your companion. And when you keep compromising and when you keep kind of playing politics, and you have to in life, you realize little by little, ash begins to cover the flames. And though there may be some red hot stuff underneath the ash, but the truth is the ash is about 2, 3, 4, 5 inches thick. You won't even see anything that's hot down there. And after a while, you just realize you're just playing politics. The fire in the belly kind of just disappears. It's because the realism destroys everything that's ideal about you. Go on YouTube and watch all these New Age teachers, whether it's Adyashanti or something, or Sadhguru or Jordan Peterson, or all these losers. And they tell you all these wonderful things. They are beautiful things that they say. I don't really care if they're logically just unsound, but it's nice. You have problems because you have a mind. Get rid of your mind. But yeah, that's great. No thought. It's beautiful. Why do you want to hold on to anger? It's some event that took place in the past. Why live in the past? Be here and be here and now. You can't find any better philosophy than that. That's idealism. That inspires people. For a few moments at a workshop, you have been in the kind of dirt and mud of your life. You go to a workshop and you're just very lucky because the speaker happens to be so magnetic and charismatic. And all of a sudden from your sides grow wings like Pegasus for the Greeks. And you begin to fly high and you look down and say, my issue with my wife, it's so little. I'm just going to go down there and say, honey, I am sorry, you were wrong. You were right and I am wrong. In fact, you have always been right. I'm going to exercise more patience because now when you're up here, that's what inspiration does. You're flying high and you look down and life looks so small and our worries are so small and pathetic. Even if you don't want to be Pegasus, watch some images from certain parts of Africa, Mexico, India, recently, Palestine. And, your son cries for video games. You fight with your wife because you want Zachary's, but she wants chicken tikka masala. And these images come your way and you realize how small and pathetic you are, intellectually, emotionally. And the sort of things that you and your wife, debate or fight about. That's moments of inspiration. And it's great. Now, all of us in this class do the best we can to protect whatever has inspired us, whatever seed now lives inside us. We want to protect it, nourish it, make it grow. So we could really not live in the past and live always in the present. Yes, I'm divorced 50 times. I want to go out on a date, but I don't want my past to interfere because the person across the table from me is absolutely lovely. I want to get to know her. But every time I take a step closer, I say, oh, okay, in a couple of weeks I'm going to fall in love and then I'm going to do ABCD to her. She's going to do it to me. So it's best just to not go there. Realism is very, very difficult, and it's something we talked about yesterday in the class, which is if you really, really want to change, idealism and realism need to go hand in hand. Someone needs to tell you that you have certain capacities, there are certain beautiful qualities to you. But as it stands, it's like walking into a room, your son's bedroom, and it's dirty, and it's messy, and it's cluttered. And now you remember how the room was. It was clean. It smelled good. It was spacious. You could breathe. And now you walk in it and you're disgusted. Well, you want to become angry, but you won't. What you do is you take your memory all the way back to 10 years ago when you first moved into the house, and you can imagine, you can picture in your mind's eye the way this room was. That's idealism. The room has the capacity to become clean once again. So what does it take? Well, you have to take a couple days off work. You have to be very tough with your son. Maybe your wife is tired and exhausted because it's Thanksgiving, she's cooked and cleaned the entire time. And you say, honey, it's time. And you're not going to take no for an answer. And you drag everyone in there. And you throw most of the stuff out, even though they may be brand new. You know, even though they may only need a wash, you take everything away. But you realize for realism, to bring idealism back to life so you can live in it, you really have to hold people hostage. You have to be fierce and tough on them. And it may not even be in your nature. I mean, I think it was in Moses' temperament. He had the temperament to be tough, to just look at someone and say, you know what, I'm just going to chop off your head. And it's okay. I don't mind. Someone like Jesus, he doesn't have that capacity. You know, if an ant is like walking on crutches, he'll pray to God so that the ant can have like 4 legs back. Okay? So, if you want to know how idealism and realism works, 2 things. First, read the book Daughter of Fire. And forgive me for mentioning these books. These are the only books that... Good morning. Were you attacked?
It was like, oh, so it was really small at first, so I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I know. It starts with a tiny little disagreement usually. And then after like 10 minutes, it's a full-blown fight, like punching and all. And then 2 hours later, it's divorce. It's good to see you. So Daughter of Fire is this woman, you know, she says, yeah, I'm going to go to India. I've heard a lot of nice things about India and Indian teachers, and I'm going to go out there and find myself a guru. You know, it's like, I want to go to Costco and find myself a TV. And so she goes there, and she has all these beautiful ideas, what yoga is, what God is, you know, and I'm probably going to find the teacher who's going to tell me to sit and breathe deeply in and out. And none of the things she experienced were part of what she imagined. She goes through almost 10 years of hell. It's hands-on. That if there are things about your life that you want to change, thinking about them is not enough. In fact, thinking by itself is no good, because what happens is you think a certain way, then your emotions are going to contradict your thoughts. And it's not that you only have one single focused thought going towards, I want to remove alcohol from my system. You're dealing with addiction, you're dealing with habits, you're dealing with friends, you're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with past. So there are lots of things to consider. So just thinking about something or just feeling about something is insufficient. So So, and a good teacher knows that. A good teacher knows how short-lived an inspiration is or could be. And just because someone all of a sudden walks in and says, "This class was so great, I think I'm going to major in philosophy." You say, "Oh, okay, fine, good for you." You know, and then you run into them a week later. "So what are you doing?" "Yeah, I'm going to Home Depot because I love 2x4s. And there is nothing wrong. You can do philosophy and be a good carpenter. I guess Jesus was one of those, if he actually existed. The other book that I think is much, much, much better, because what you have in Daughter of Fire is love, faith, and trust. That's all you got. And it's a relationship between a man and a woman. And that's how it usually is. Women are really, really good students, awful teachers. Men, they don't make good students, and therefore you don't have too many male teachers that are really good. You have a lot of counterfeits, but, you know, you have a lot of gold-plated, but they're just not gold. The other book that you may be interested in is In Search of the Miraculous. Course in Miracles, it's a great book. It's a thick, fat book. I don't suggest anyone reading the book because, I mean, maybe you'll like it, I don't know. But what is interesting about In Search of the Miraculous is a guy who says, "I don't need you to love me. That'll happen eventually. I don't need you to trust me." Well, actually, he doesn't say that because you need actually all those things. So let me correct myself. He inspires you. He gives you all these ideas that you can become, but that's 10 years down the line. Now, how do you make the ideal real? Well, first I need to tell you what your flaws are. And every time, for example, you go to him, he's not going to tell you, "Oh, Joshua, you're so great." You're pathetic. Every single day. He makes you feel really small, really bad, really incompetent. And yet, because there is something about Gurdjieff, you can't leave him. And most often, you're engaged in building things. Doing gardening, building a room, building a house, going to fancy dinners, and having conversations with people, doing exercises that are really quite confusing and rigorous to the body. You know. So what you have is a man who understands human biology, human psychology, human society, human culture, and he has come to also realize that most of the things you believe in and have faith in are in fact obstacles to your growth. Now, for a teacher to become both an idealist as well as a realist, that teacher must know the value of what he has or she has. And that teacher must also know the value of his or her time and energy. And that teacher must choose students very, very, very carefully. Because remember, you may be a great mechanic, but you may not be at a position in life where you can spend 10 hours a day on a car. That stage for you is past. Now you're looking for a car that maybe has, I don't know, tiny issues. You know, that only requires maybe 2 hours of your time and energy. And that is what you will find in Search of the Miraculous. You know, a guy who doesn't care about how you think about yourself, how you think about religion or philosophy or life. It's his way only. And though you're there and just your presence at his shop is an expression of idealism, for you to get to that particular point, you need to be beaten up. And he does that really, really, really well. You know, it's a story that just has never left me. It's in one of those books written by J.G. Bennett. One of his students who lived to be almost 100, and he has about, I don't know, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 books out there. He says one day this woman comes to Gurdjieff and says, "You know, I've listened to you, I'd like to be your student." He says, "Fine, that's great. I'm your teacher then. If you want to be my student, I'll accept you." And he places in front of her a bowl of ice cream, chocolate. And he says to her, have you ever had mustard with ice cream? She says, mustard? Oh, heavens, no. I've never heard anyone having mustard with their ice cream. Oh, it's beautiful. You should really, really try it. And so she goes into the kitchen, grabs a bucket of mustard and pours it on the chocolate ice cream. And Gurdjieff sees all of this. And then he goes to her and says, you need to leave the grounds. You suck as a human being. Why? I did exactly as you told me. Yeah, it's because you have no common sense. Who the hell would pour mustard on ice cream? And you realize this is a man who doesn't care about you simply being fully obedient. You need to have common sense. You're a rational being. Use your reasoning abilities a little bit. Now, we don't like people who are realists. We don't like someone like Diogenes the cynic. We don't like someone like the Buddha. Buddha in theory is great. Buddhism in theory is great. It's just not a realistic way to live life. Jesus as an ideal teacher is great. As a realist, no. I mean, imagine the rich young man in the New Testament. It's a beautiful story. It's no different than the story of Abraham. That if you want to prove yourself to me, sacrifice the thing that's most valuable to you. Your son, either Isaac or Ishmael. What you have in the rich young man is, the guy has good parents. That's the first thing that you need. Have good parents. So you don't fantasize about how would it feel if I had a great father, a great mother, a great this or a great that. You need to have graduated from that. And then have lots of power in society. So you're not like Donald Trump, always lusting after something you've never had before. And by the time you have that power, and by the time you're tamed enough to know what to do with all that power so you don't destroy people, that takes a long time. And by the time you become cooked, proficient in knowing how to use that power well, man, you've destroyed an entire country. I mean, before the presence of Donald Trump as the president, sure, okay, I don't like Middle Easterners, and I don't like African Americans, and I don't like Mexicans or Chinese or white people, all those things. But at least I would keep them to myself. Now, everybody just comes out and tells you exactly how they feel about you. Something that the U.S. has been able to repress for at least 40 years. And there is nothing wrong with repression. And so you need to have lots of money to realize that money, yes, it buys a lot of things. It just doesn't buy happiness, whatever that may mean for you. And so he goes to Jesus and says, listen, I've listened to your sermons and they're beautiful. You keep talking about the kingdom of heaven. I want it. Because I try to buy it with money, it's not working. I try to buy it with helping the homeless, it's not working. And you keep telling us that the kingdom of heaven can only be accessed through you. So give it to me. And he looks at him and says, okay, well, you've listened to my idealistic philosophy of kingdom of God. Now let me be a realist. Go and sell everything you have. The guy says, that's okay. I can go sell my car and my house and my wife and my kids, and then I will come follow you. He says, no. You need to give away your money. All of it? Yes. Why? Well, I'm a monogamist. It's either my way or the highway. Now, one of the things about money is that it gives you security about your future. That you have faith in your money. And that faith gives you money to have access to the future. And whenever you have money, and whenever you have access to your future, you're in charge. Your faith is not in Yahweh, your faith is in money. And what Jesus says, if you really want the kingdom of God, this is what you ought to do. I want to make sure you have no support system at all, that just in case you are tempted to leave me, you say, well, go where? Do what? Have faith in the unknown. Have faith in the mystery. Have faith in a man that you hardly know. Because money will give you access to future. Me, Jesus Christ, will give you access to nothing. You're nourished by faith alone. And the guy says, man, that's just too much. I can't do it. Now, the flip side is a story that is not true, but nevertheless, let's just say, the story actually took place, which is the story of Mary Magdalene. As tradition has it, she's a prostitute. And by chance, all of a sudden this conflict grows inside her and she says, maybe I should change profession. I just don't know what to do. That's Mary in her idealistic form. I want to be a nun, but right now I'm only a prostitute. She listens to a sermon. That's all it takes. Maybe 2, maybe 3, who knows? And that sermon is so powerful, and the image and the presence of Jesus is so powerful, or Socrates, or Malcolm X, you know. And she leaves her profession altogether. Now, when you change your profession, it means, well, you no longer have access to money, power. If for the past 20 years, that's how you make your money, now you can't. You know, it's like this thing that happened in class yesterday. Someone asked, did you hear that Snoop Dogg quit smoking weed? And then Kevin in the back says, oh, that was just nonsense. You know, how could someone being an avid smoker and going everywhere and advertising on Jimmy Kimmel and this and that, you know, all of a sudden one morning wake up and say, I quit. It doesn't work that way. You know, nothing works that way. And again, if the Gospels, just one of them perhaps, if they have any accuracy to them, is that when Jesus is dead and when her mother and a few disciples go to kind of just look at him, Mary is behind them and she says, I'm family as well. And the mother looks at Mary and says, yeah, she is. Now, that is realism. That something about Jesus had the power to turn something that was imaginary into something profoundly real. I don't know how you make a Plato. You know, I don't know how you make someone ethical, moral. I don't know how you make someone reflective. You know, I think people, because of pride and lust and greed, I think we have a tendency of assuming a good host of things about ourselves. You know, you read a couple of books and you go to gatherings and you talk these beautiful, you know, you spit out these beautiful statements or words or ideas and people say, oh wow, he must know a few things. But the truth is you don't know anything. You know, I always say if you want to know how things usually work, if you want to change anything about yourself, read the book of Job 1,000 times. You know, not only is God an idealist, not only is Job an idealist, but it takes the cunningness and the wisdom, the insight, the intuitive of Satan to know that it's good that you think certain things about yourself, but let me put those things into action. Let me bring them down to life. And then you can see for yourself how much your worth really is. You know, all of us in this class, if you've been in a relationship, you don't walk into a relationship knowing full well you're going to walk out. Unless you just have a history, you know. But if this is your first or second or third relationship, and you're like 25, 26, there's always going to be this hope that it's going to work. No one enters into a marriage in hopes of a divorce. You know, unless, you know, you've kind of looked at this man, you realize he's old, he's got a couple more years to live, he's got lots of money, let's marry him, let's have sex with him, hopefully he'll just die on top of me, and I'll inherit the whole thing, you know. And then you realize, well, life is a realist beast. And sure, yeah, you've been Stoic, you've read a good amount of Stoicism, you've in fact been a Buddhist and a Christian, you've been like a buffet of all these ideas for all these years. And yeah, you go on a stage and you talk this and you talk that, and now there is your companion, and now there are your kids, and now there your parents are getting sick and dying and they need help, but you know where to be found. And you realize, yeah, you're only good in thought, but not action. But to be fair, let me go back and say a few things about this tradition we call Zoroastrianism. And I'm saying it that way so you guys can kind of remember. Zoro, like the movie, ass, donkey, train, and ism, Zoroastrianism. To give some credit to this tradition, the ancient Jews or Hebrews had no belief in afterlife. Abi, good morning, how are you? They had no belief in afterlife, they had no belief in soul, they had no belief in a God who would judge them, send them to heaven or hell. It was only after their contact with Zoroastrians that the Jews began to adopt a new kind of philosophy. No different than Egyptians, no different than the Bedouins in Arabia when Muhammad came about. So remember, every religious or philosophical tradition really owes what it is to its past. And after a few years, all of a sudden you have the idea of heaven and hell in the Jewish tradition. Now, if I was to summarize the entire Zoroastrian tradition for you in just 3 or 4 or 5 words, it would be this.